Hi everyone, I am Jerome and welcome to our class on Introduction to Visual Methods in Social Science Research. And for the first lesson for this video series, we'll be talking about visuals and social life. So the basis for this lesson is from the first chapter of Stephen Spencer's book, Visual Research Methods in the Social Sciences. And there are subtopics under this particular lesson, and these are visual culture, representation and politics, aesthetics, intertextuality, post-modernity, images and objects, and we're also going to be talking about the benefits of doing visual approaches in social science research. So I guess we can all agree that during this time in our lives, we are living in a visually saturated culture, and that during this time of late modernity, we are undergoing a visual turn, and we're increasingly becoming an ocular-centric culture, wherein a lot of the things that we experience is very much connected to a lot of the things that we see and the images that we chance upon in our every second of our lives. And of course, the increasing visual culture that we experience in everyday life is furthered because of the digital communications that we now have. I think when Spencer wrote this particular book, this was done around 2010 and below. But you know that in the time between 2010 up to now, there's just a robust explosion of so many gadgets and affordances and digital communication devices for us to be able to, be able to take as many photographs and videos as we like. It has become more accessible for everyone to be able to take photos compared to what it was a few decades ago. And then, of course, we are increasingly embedded, in our lives, media, and this is not just the traditional media where you have your TV, your newspapers, your print media, your movies, but also we have new media, which is, of course, increasing engagements that we have in social media, the increasing number of social media apps, and of course the increasing capabilities that these apps have. So all of these things that are happening, particularly in terms of digital communications, changes in media, increasing engagement of people on media and social media, have just furthered or emphasized and increased the visual turn of our lives, our everyday lives. And of course, another feature of late modernity that also has a symbiotic relationship with the visual turn of our culture is globalization. So because there's an increasing connectivity, there's an increasing need for people to consume more and more images for us to be able to learn cultures and social life of people who are in different places that we can't see but we can experience with, or we can have a parasocial relationship with because of the internet and other forms of digital connectivity. So globalization, mediatization of society, the visual turn of society, increasing visual culture, these are kind of experiences that we see in society that kind of increase each other. And so, as sociologists and social scientists, I think it is but apt for us to be able to look at all of the visuals that we see every day in a more critical manner, because we do believe in our experience, whether we are sociologists, social scientists, or just normal lay people, we know that that the adage "to see is to believe" is true. There are things that we see already in our eyes in the form of photographs, in the form of images online, in the forms of videos that we kind of say, totoo ba yan? Or is that real? Or is it really conveying what it's supposed to convey? Is this image in a way sort of biased? Is it sending some sort of message that can be damaging to people, to certain groups of people, that can make them more vulnerable and marginalized? Is this really real? Is this manipulated? Are the messages that are found here something that we can accept? Is this something that's socially acceptable? Is this something that I can take into my culture? So because of the increasing visuals that we meet every day, more lay persons and more so people who do research in the social sciences need to be very critical about the things, the images that we consume, the images that we see every day, whether they're moving images or they're still images. And I think it's safe to say, and I quote from the book, that visual evidence of photographs or videos is only a partial representation of the reality that we perceive. And there are so many things that can, affect what we see and how it's really representing reality. The angle of the video or the angle of the photograph, what is being placed inside the frame, the color gradients that are being used. I'm not a photographer though, just to put it out there, so I don't know the mechanics of this, but I do know that when you change the hue, the saturation, the composition of the photograph, it kind of also makes the meanings that are being represented by a certain photo more malleable. It changes as you make these certain decisions when you're holding the camera or when you do it post-editing. So what we see is not necessarily what we should believe, or we should not necessarily believe what the photograph is telling us point blank immediately. So we have to really consume them a little bit more critically. And so Spencer argues that realism or images are not necessarily representing realism. What we see are not exactly what is in reality. Now, what we see in images is not necessarily what we see in social reality. But according to Spencer, photographs show an explicitness. We're not really showing necessarily what is completely real in social reality, but we're making things explicit. And there's the choice of the person holding the camera, there's the choice of a person holding the camcorder, there's the choice of the person editing that photograph. And there's something, when we try to make the videos, there's something that we want to try to make explicit or implicit, Like, for example, when we take a selfie, we kind of already know what angle our face would look best, right? So we kind of, when you say selfie, you already move your head in such a way that you already show your best features. And you know that there are certain features. Like, for example, when you put your phone down and you can see your chin, that's usually a bad angle for you to take. And it makes explicit, It makes explicit the bad features of your face. And so when you move your face in a certain way, when you face the camera, when you take a selfie, you make certain things in your face more explicit. And you hide some features of the face that you feel like wouldn't be something that would be put in terms of, what the beauty standard is. So when we take photos, and when anyone takes a photo, or when we post a photo, when we decide to post a certain photo, there are certain things that we want to make explicit. And the things that we want to make explicit is very much tied to social value. So for example, again, you wouldn't take a selfie of yourself without a filter. So the choice of using a filter, if that's such no judgment there, but if you do choose to use a filter, like a Facetune app on your face, that's a decision. But that not kind of decision. It's not something that's individual. We know that as social scientists, and these are very much linked to our. This is very much linked to our social values, and to our culture of what we believe is acceptable culturally, right? So, visuals or images do not necessarily give you the full frame of what social reality is, but it makes certain things explicit, and the things that it makes explicit or the things that it hides is based on the one producing or consuming a certain picture, or a certain photograph or a certain image, So that's one of the principles that we are kind of looking at, the more basic foundational principle why we're doing visual research in the first place. because images are socially embedded, no? The way we see, the way we take pictures, they are embedded in our social realities, in our own social values and culture. And as we all know, and probably we have this everyday experience, especially during the time of the election, images can be used to deceive, right? And for example, this is an example. The pictures that are found here, you can find this on YouTube. It's an ad from The Guardian. It's a journalistic organization in the United States, no? And they were showing that there are three. There's one video, but they were showing it the same event in 3 frames. So the first one is, if from this frame, the man is running towards a woman. So probably if you're the viewer, it would evoke some questions about what that man is running away from, or that man is going to chase the woman or going to do something bad to the woman, right? But later on, we see when you place the camera at the back, same event, no? But when you place the camera at the back of the running man, you would see that he is running towards a guy, and he is pushing a guy who's holding a briefcase, and then the guy who's holding the briefcase kind of shields himself from the person running, and then the guy pushes him away. So from here, we would think, this guy is actually running towards a person, not the woman in the first frame, but actually a man. And this man who is running may be bad. But then there's a third frame, or a third angle from where that video is taken from the top. And we see here that the man is actually running to that person with the briefcase because there's a pile of wood that is about to fall on this. And the act of pushing the man away is actually saving that person from being injured or being disabled, or probably dying from being crushed by the wood above him. So again, and that's the reason, and that gives us the idea, or that kind of solidifies or supports the argument that images can deceive. Images only expresses a certain level of explicitness, and this explicitness is controlled by the one holding the camera, right? Not a certain event can happen, but when it's captured by a certain photography device or a video filming device, it can tell different stories. And so therefore, photographs are not necessarily equal to realism. It's not really realism, but it's really a question of what is the one taking that image, or posting that images, editing that image, trying to make explicit. And what it tries to make explicit is, again, very much grounded to our social values and to our cultural backgrounds. And so visual representation, therefore, is political, no? And therefore, there is that kind of danger that we see, particularly a few years back, that, when you see a picture, that's a definitive evidence, no? So when there's a picture, that's the evidence that really happened, or that's a evidence. So that we're kind of that, no? Pag pinakitaan tayo ng picture, when we're shown a picture of people doing something, it's also already, that person did it because it's taken on camera, or there's a screenshot, etc. No, while of course, legally speaking, no, if the camera taken photo is taken honestly, there are no edits that are being done, then maybe that can be taken as authoritative evidence. But we are living in a world wherein, we're a little bit more critical about the images that we see, but most of the time we are still very much, when we see a picture, we kind of believe that, that is what happened, without asking what's happening behind the camera. And so, because of that kind of, when you place an image, it says a lot about, what that image is trying to convey, and all whoever is in that picture. So, when there are political motives, it's easy to frame your picture in such a way that you would look good, or a certain politician would look good, or a certain place would look beautiful, no? But actually, you're seeing. I don't know if you remember that picture from Rappler, I think, and then there are pictures of really tall buildings, and there's a new bridge in that particular province. But that picture also took kind of a certain area where there's a lot of slums and shanties. And then people were kind of reacting, why would you want to include the shanties? Why would you want to include the slums in that picture? And you're reporting about the new bridge or the the urbanized sector of that society. How dare you? And again, going back to explicitness, no, I think that person who took that photograph in Rappler is trying to make explicit, yeah, there's a lot of buildings here, there's progress, but there's a sector of society of that particular community or city or province that is left behind in development. And that particular framing, has a political statement. Whereas, probably pro-government photographers would take only the picture or would frame their picture that the only thing that you see in that particular photo is just, the tall buildings and the newly constructed bridge. And that's that. And then you say, progress, right? And, we live in that world, you show a new building, diba? You show a new bridge and then you post it, and then especially if you're pro-government, that's a testament that this government is working good. And that's the authoritative evidence that we are talking about. You show a picture and then, we're in a good spot, Or you saw a really bad, you see people crowding and they're waiting for their ayuda, they're waiting for their assistance. And then you take that picture, and that's authoritative evidence that this country is going down. Right, so, because photographs are very powerful, they're very striking, so they can be used as authoritative evidence that can be framed, manipulated, and censorship. Of course, if you're Filipino, you might have seen the picture that I'm posting here, taken from Philstar News, and this is kind of a news that says that a certain group of NPA people, a group of insurgents, that as considered by the government, is surrendering. Are surrendering, and as you see, you don't need really to have a very keen eye to see that this is very much poorly edited, because you don't see, drop shadows there, so you would see that this is just a crop from another photo, but it tells you to. For people who are pro-government and who might be, who might not know about editing, would say, this government is doing good. It's keeping rebels away, etc., etc. But for the others, they would say that this is a testament of, that the government is trying to manipulate. It's not transparent, etc., etc. So. So that's the power of visuals in terms of political. And we also understand that for every photograph, however mundane that photograph is, there are so many embedded discourses. Like, for example, the one that I told you about, you taking a selfie and just taking a particular angle of your face, because that angle of your face is beautiful, and what you define as beautiful is very much tied to Western standards. So that's the discourse, the beauty, the narratives discourse. Or probably you're taking yourself because you are larger or heavier or a heavy set person, and you want to send a statement, let's not be fat phobic, stop fat shaming. So you are flaunting your heavy-set body, to make that statement, and that's kind of a discourse that you're embedded in. Some people will say, stomach in, and then you take a picture. That particular act or that particular word that we say when you say stomach in or chest out, smile. These cues, are really embedded into a larger discourse of what really looks great in photos. That your tummy is tucked, your chest is heaved out, right? You're smiling even, even if, there's a wreckage happening around you, or you and your partner just went into a fight, but, you want to show that you're happy. So you're happy in the picture. So, yeah. There's so many embedded discourses in photographs. Those are some mundane examples, but of course there are examples like this photograph that really very politically charged, right? And this is just one of the many visuals, many photographs that we see every day, that are manipulated, and this happens in many ways, in all places of the political spectrum, right? And there's now in politics particularly, there's management of visibility, meaning, if you only make visible the things that are good, or if you know that you're doing bad, you don't show yourself at all. You can probably remember some leaders who are like that, who because of being scared of being concerned about being wrong on camera, they would just really rehearse or compose certain visuals for the public to consume instead of doing things live, right? And of course, there's mediated publicness. What we see from a public, as a public, is not raw. It's already mediated. We see particularly, when you remember the SONA, the State of the Nation address, it's weird that you even have a director for that, right? And this is just a person. This is just your president, addressing the nation. But you have a director. You have multiple cameras, to show what's happening in the whole of that venue where all of the lawmakers are, and what the choices of visuals that are being presented to us by the director, and the one who is editing on the spot. These are choices, right? When you show particular people in the seats in the lawmakers' benches, that tells you a statement, right? So these are choices, right? And these choices, again, are politically charged. Both these really political arenas and those that are mundane, our everyday lives, like the selfie example that I've been saying earlier. And of course, the visuals aren't only just for political purposes and social purposes, but it's also having aesthetic purposes in our lives. And, why do we consume so many visuals in our lives? Photographs, videos. I know that, like me, you have had that experience of doom scrolling. I don't have TikTok, but I do have Instagram and the stories in Instagram. I sometimes find myself doom scrolling. Because we know that, we live in a visual society wherein we prefer infographics over text. We prefer videos over lectures. Of course, what I'm doing right now is not the best for a visual society, although again there are arguments against visual learners, etc. But you get what I mean, no? But because innately visual art, visual products such as photographs, such as paintings, videos, films, the things that we see, no matter how abstract or real they appear to be, they just strike a little bit more stronger compared to saying the words, right? It evokes so much affect and feelings compared to just reading the words, when you read, I want to say Harry Potter, but I don't want to use that example. When you read probably Hunger Games, and you imagine the text in your mind, this is what the dome looks like where they do all of the fighting in Hunger Games. But when you see it on film, diba? There's so much emotions. This is how it looks like. This is how the gore looks like. This is how the bloody fights look like. And you get more emotion. And even if you don't agree with, I didn't interpret the text well, like what we see in Marvel movies. But that is an emotion as well, I don't agree with how you interpreted this particular scene in the movie. That's another emotion, right? So the thing that we see, it evokes so much emotion. And it sends sometimes stronger message. Sometimes when you say, we would like to ask for money to solicit for a particular health need. I have cancer. You have a long text. Yeah, probably you would feel pity, sympathy over the person. But when you pair it with a picture of a baby with hydrocephalus, it would generate more emotions. So sometimes they can communicate better with a more emphatic way compared to just text. And therefore, that's again another reason why we want to use visuals in research as well, because there's so much to videos that texts cannot fully grasp or fully represent. And of course, we use photographs and visuals as forms of art therapy. So, art therapy is the use of any form of arts, visual, fine, or performance arts for us to be able to get to our therapeutic and rehabilitation goals, right? So, and there's an increasing demand for art and music therapy. But yeah, art therapy has been here a long period of time, and it has been known quantitatively and experimentally as a good way for us to be able to meet our therapeutic goals with clients. And that aesthetics, help in regulation of emotions, in meeting rehabilitative goals. So yeah, visuals are aesthetic. This is a part of our aesthetic everyday life. I'm putting here, this particular picture of Lerma, of Pieta. I think this is a very much contested picture. I do know that eventually, a few years after this happened, there were certain legal outcomes that came that kind of contradicted some of the stories that came with this picture. But, during this period, we're talking about a lot about the drug wars and the extrajudicial killings. And it was such an everyday thing, It became an everyday thing that people started to become numb about it, when you were having 1, 2, 3, 5 people dying. And then you have the cardboard, wag tularan, ako ay isang drug pusher. It became so numbing, But when you see pictures like this, it tells you like the whole story. It just gives you emotion. It gives you the story. It gives you death. It gives you grief, right? And then the composition gives you darkness, and then you have it, many things, that sometimes text cannot give you. And so that's why I placed this picture. I am enamored by this picture so much, ayan. And of course, we have to talk about intertextuality. Intertextuality particularly means that what we know is basically much scaffolded on previous knowledge, or what we believe is socially acceptable is because of a foundational norm or belief that we're attaching it to. So that's kind of intertextuality, and you cannot remove them from each other. So when we interpret pictures, we are taking from previous knowledge, previous experiences. So that's intertextuality. So when we interpret our images, we base it from a cultural knowledge accessed by the viewer. So as explained here, every text and every reading depends on prior codes, right? So like, for example, you wouldn't know how to multiply unless you know how to add, Same thing with, um, same thing with text. You wouldn't know, um, you wouldn't know uh, your you wouldn't know how to read if you don't know your ABCs. Again, that's a very extreme example, no? But yeah, every text or every meaning that we hold true and every way we read the text that we see is depends on the prior coding that we receive in our society, in our social life before. So an observer's perception of an image or indeed any social sign is constrained by rhetorical forms from which exist or circulate in a culture. So I'll give you a particular example of how intertextuality works, no? And I'll give particularly a professional and a personal experience from professional standpoint. Like for example, when I haven't yet immersed in sociological studies when I was still a nurse, I viewed the world in a different way because I am taking my experiences of me studying and working a little bit as a nurse. And so when I see someone who would be sick, right? Or when I see some nurses who would, go and protest, no? I would think, for example, let's put the sickness, for example, no? There's high rates of sickness. I would usually blame, originally, no? I would blame the patient, no, for why did you engage in these behaviors, no? Especially for example, when we talk about HIV particularly. So I was there now. Because you had reckless sex, so that's on you. No, that was I used to believe. No, our studies in nursing during my time were not very socially inclusive or not affirming at all. And then when I see nurses, stopping their work, going to protests for their wages, I would say that's not how nurses should do it. We were trained to be caring. We shouldn't be raising our voices. We have to do everything more more formal. You can do formal letters naman. So why do you have to do protests, no? But when I dip my toes into sociology, I see the same thing, but I would look at it now from a different standpoint. So when a person says that they have HIV, I interrogate, why did this person need to get into reckless sex? Or did this person not know? If this person not know which sectors of society failed there, which institution failed for equipping or making this person capable of protecting themselves while they are seeking sexual pleasures, which should be an okay thing to do. Or when I see nurses protesting, and when I see other nurses saying that nurses shouldn't be protesting, I advocate for no, they're doing the right thing. That's one of the way that we kind of get our message out. No, this is how you get. This is how labor rights should be fought. No, especially if the institutional ways of grievance did not really have a positive effect. No, so in those two instances in my life, the way I interpreted the visuals that I see and the stories that I hear, would depend on what quotes was I taken from, no? So that's intertextuality, right? So and then of course we have the tropes in visual media that of course sometimes they don't teach you that, but because you are exposed to these tropes, you kind of already know. Like for example, I didn't watch this movie, I didn't watch any MMFF, because I was so busy during the Christmas break. But when you see this picture, you already know that this is a film. You already know, this is horror. Why? Because the composition, it's dark. You look at Nadine's face, she looks concerned. So this might be a clip from a movie that is scary, nah? So it may be a horror film, which it is, no? And when it's a comedy film, the poster would be done in a different way. When it's a drama film or a rom-com, you would see it's a different way. If it's a documentary, a historical story, it would be composed a different way, the posters. No, the color grading of the film would be different. I don't know particularly, but I do notice that when it's happier, the tones are usually also very happy. If it's a horror movie, which I do not like to watch, no, but I do know it's mostly dark, and then you have lots of close up facial expression so that people can see the fear in the eyes of the people who are acting. So you kind of already know that. Even if you didn't go to film school, you know what you're expecting when there. And so when the Commission for Racial Equality showed this particular picture, you will see this picture in the book. It tells a lot of story. Like, for example, this ad feels like it came from a horror story. And it kind of taps onto that idea, because if you are a person who is a dominant, a white person looking at this particular, if you're being targeted by this particular ad, you would know that so this plays on the stereotype that when you go into a black neighborhood, or you do an African American, a black skinned person, it's scary, and you have the red here, and then you have a question mark to just kind of tell you to kind of check on your feelings, right? And then it tells you he's a dentist, so you kind of subvert, you kind of disrupt the interpretation and say, this is not really about blackness, it's about, and I got you, maybe you think we were proliferating a stereotype, but you're not. But you maybe have to check on your feelings. So this is what kind of how tropes work. Also, the way we interpret is based on many components. And basically, we can look at the basic model of communication. I don't know if you've had this before, but basically we have this very simple model of communication where you have the sender, and the sender sends a message. There's an encoder, a channel where that particular message is being seen, and then a decoder, and then you have the message being received by the receiver, and the receiver gives feedback. And then, of course, you have the noise that can interrupt the way the message can be understood through the channel. So, in studying visuals, particularly, especially for looking at preset visuals instead of created visuals within the research project, we also use the same model. Of course, you have here the different noises, that can influence how the message is encoded by the sender and decoded by the receiver. So, for example, what's the production context? What is the aesthetic political motive, of the one sending? Who is the intended message audience? So again, the way you take a picture, for a child would be different. For example, someone who wants to consume an R18 content would be different. Definitely the way you compose a picture, so how it's transmission and how it's displayed, and then who is your audience? How do they decode? Do they know the context, of what they're viewing? Is this are they coming from shared meanings, or are these personal meanings that they're using to decode that particular information? And then what is the relations to power? Like, for example, if someone in power gives you a particular visual, are you more likely to believe what that visual is telling you? And then, of course, you may need to do some form of discourse analysis, meaning you want to look into some form of looking beyond what is being seen, according to genre, format, composition. Although we will not be having that particular lesson in this class, but that's one way of looking at visuals or pictures. And then and how do we do that as researchers? We can probably analyze image, again, how it's related to power, what is the genre being used, what is the myth or the narrative being propagated by the video or the film or the photo. How is it related to the language that is attached to it? What is semiotics or the meanings that are found there? And then, of course, discourse analysis, etc., in relations to power. So, yeah. So when we analyze photographs, we can take any one or more of these routes, although particularly that is for more on media studies, so ito more of media studies frame ito. So for our class, a more sociological and anthropological will be dealing more with participatory methods, and more of videos and photographs being produced as first-hand data compared to us analyzing visuals that are already available, because that takes a different expertise, which we will not be tackling in this class. Another component of our society that, again, makes visuals a very important aspect is surveillance. And probably have heard of this in your contemporary social theories. The increasing spectacle in our lives, and of course increasing simulations of our experiences. So of course, panopticon or panopticism, that our moral architecture, is we're being observed by many people. And of course, in addition to that observation, there's increasing use of visuals, or taking our images, the images of what we own and the images of what we do for that particular for that particular surveillance. And then we are living in a scopic regime. A scopic regime is that the way we interpret videos is, or photos, is being influenced by people. And then of course, we live in a time wherein they're increasingly there's increasing voyeurism or scopophilia. We can just take pictures of everybody. Probably you've seen a lot of videos of Karens in the US, and this is it's increasingly accessible for us, to take visuals so easily, and we kind of take that for granted. We can just take visuals of anything using our phones, whether that's a video or a photograph, and then of course a particular dominant a dominant way of doing voyeurism is the male gaze, seeing women as objects, composing photographs that objectify them, And then, according to the board, and probably would agree, maybe you have watched Bo Burnham's Inside. I promote that. I like that particular film very much, but in relation to that, the board said, life has become a permanent opium war, where we want to look at spectacle, we want to look at quick gratification, right? An immense accumulation of spectacles, and because of that, and many of the spectacles is really visual, right? Beauty, events, travel, also the spectacle of gore, the spectacle of sex, the spectacle of, tea, shade, the spectacle of elections, and you see elections now, they're very more spectacle, diba? So, because we are in a society that thrives on a lot of spectacles, easy gratification, easy on the eyes, wow moments, and that wow moment can be wow happy, or wow I hate this, or wow I am angered, because we are having rage addiction as a society now. And of course, because of the increasing increasing number of digital gadgets and digital affordances we have, our once truly lived lives has become mere representation, especially because of the COVID-19. Many of our experiences, concerts, me giving you this particular lecture, this really become more of representation of who we are, right? And visuals have something to do with that particular. This is not something that he says as bad, It's just that the board says na this is what's happening. Whether that's good or bad, it's based on context, I guess. Right? So, yeah, most of what we experience are merely just representation of what they are. We watch concerts on Netflix, on video, where they're streaming. We travel with people even without traveling by watching YouTube videos or travel blogs, right? So our society is increasingly mediated, and as it is increasingly mediated, there's an increasing role of visuals in our society because a lot of these mediations have visuals. But also, aside from taking photographs of picture or of people, of advertisements, of events, we also have visuals that are not necessarily photographs. Visuals like objects that we see every day, right? And according to Banks, objects have biographies. They have stories, even the most mundane ones. For example, I would say, sometimes I had this iPad and I would say, this particular iPad, it saved me during the pandemic because this is the one that I used for one whole term and because I had no laptop. So I've attached meanings to the particular iPad. So that can be as mundane as that. Probably you have a stuffed toy that you love and there's a social story to it because it's given by your partner or whatever. Or you can have really more grand objects like a certain antique furniture, and you said that this was taken, this is where this is constructed by your grandfather, grandmother, whatever. So every object that we own, they have a life story. They are a part of our lives or someone else's life or a group of people's life. They have history. And then we can see them, And the way we place certain things in our house also has something to do with, social norms and also our individual quirks, right? So objects are linked to the system of production. They also represent monetary and social status, conscious conspicuousness, consumerism, conspicuous consumerism. And then studying objects as a means to study everyday life is also something that we do as social scientists. And there's a lot in our material culture that are taken for granted. Again, in sociology, we talk about the large things. We talk about political misinformation. We talk about corruption. But we also talk about mundane things, taken for granted things, like beauty. What makes a certain person beautiful? What makes a family tight in the time of COVID-19? So there are small things that we study. There are also big things that we study. Why do people get into chess? That's also a mundane thing that we ask. And in doing so, visuals can help us answer those things. So I guess what's important here is that most of your research, the work that you do, or the research that you've learned so far, in the department particularly is quantitative. We use numbers to make sense of social reality. And then qualitative. Visual research is within the realm of qualitative, but for introductory qualitative, we don't immediately introduce visuals because that's a whole kind of monster. Actually, when you do qualitative research using interviews, text, it's already very difficult. That's why I thought maybe you can expand your qualitative research capabilities by adding a particular topic on visual research. Maybe this would interest you because I personally am excited to integrate visuals in qualitative research, and these are the reasons why. So, what are the benefits of visual approaches? One, as we explained, the visual has an explicit and immediacy which delivers a multisensory impact. So, when you interview persons, it's beautiful. It also gives a certain explicitness explicitness to it. And then if you're doing narrative and discourse analysis, you also look for explicitness. And you also look for implicitness in the stories that they're telling you during interviews or FGDs or textual analysis. That's beautiful for qualitative research. But visuals also have explicitness. And again, immediacy. I think this is more like, for example, an interview will reach 30 minutes, 1 hour, 1.5 hour. Tell the story. But sometimes you ask a person, take a picture of a certain highlight of the day that represents your experience as a single mother during the pandemic. You take a picture, and the picture can already tell you a lot of words. I will share a research that I've done in our F2F session. But yeah, and it's multisensory, right? You're not just reading, but you're also seeing. And maybe if you're studying videos, which we'll not touch for this, because again, we will not touch videos particularly in this class. But if you want to do that as well as a part of your research, it's multisensory. When you see visuals, you feel so many things. Number 2, visuals can create vivid and authentic personal narratives. Because again, what a photograph is made explicit is made explicit or is controlled by the one holding the camera. So just imagine, if you ask a question to your participants, you provide them a camera or they have cameras and they answer you using a picture, that is already loaded with a lot of their narratives. It's their choice. And the choice, again, is influenced by their personal agency, by their social structures. And visual material provides a form of thick description. I tell you, when you look at visual research, sometimes they will just work on 4 visuals, 4 case studies, and they can say so many things just by looking at 4 pictures. Right? Especially when you're into media studies or film studies, which again, we're not going to be handling those things. But yeah, visuals are very thick because they tell so many stories, and there's so many things that you can do with a picture, in qualitative research particularly. So, and those are the benefits of integrating visuals in your research, in your qualitative research. So, in this video, we were able to talk about the role of the visual in our social life, how it's integrated to culture, politics, to late modernity. Why do we have such a robust visual culture in our society, and how that influences how we think, how we feel, how visuals are being used by people who want to control us, how we use visuals for us to be able to express ourselves and reify, cultural norms and socially accepted beliefs, right? So, so hope to see you in our next video for more particularly on visual social science research.